There comes a moment in every life when movement no longer feels like progress. You wake up, go through the rituals you've mastered, the coffee, the commute, the polite small talk, the steady rhythm of what you call normal, and yet something inside feels quietly unsettled. You're doing everything right, yet it doesn't feel right anymore. It's not failure that's holding you back. It's comfort. Somewhere between ambition and routine, you stopped risking the discomfort that growth demands. The routines that once gave you stability have now turned into walls that keep you from seeing what you're capable of becoming. If you've ever sat in a room, looked around and thought, I should be happier than this, you've already heard the whisper of that truth. It's the quiet restlessness that tells you something deeper is calling, not louder but truer. It's not dissatisfaction in a toxic way. It's the ache of unrealized potential, of a life that's become too safe, too predictable, too polished. There's no visible pain, no crisis to force change, just the numbing comfort of good enough. That's the most dangerous place a human being can live, not in chaos, but in quiet contentment that slowly erodes their edge. Most people never notice the moment it happens. You achieve something, a job, a relationship, a level of income, and for a while it feels like freedom. You worked hard to reach it, and you deserve to enjoy it. But over time, what began as a reward turns into a routine, and the same comfort that once felt like peace begins to feel like sedation. Life becomes a treadmill of familiar actions, productive, maybe even profitable, but no longer purposeful. You're moving, but you're not advancing. You're busy, but you're not fulfilled. You're safe, but not alive. Comfort disguises itself as peace, but it's often a soft prison, one made of familiar habits and predictable choices. The walls are invisible, but they're real. You build them each time you choose what feels easy over what feels right. You reinforce them each time you silence the small voice that asks for more growth, more challenge, more truth. And after a while, you start to confuse safety with success. You start believing that avoiding pain is the same as finding peace. But as Seneca once said, a ship is safe in harbor, but that's not what ships are built for. Imagine a musician who plays the same song every day, perfectly. At first it's practice, then it becomes mastery. Eventually it becomes monotony. The same skill that once elevated them now traps them in repetition. That's what comfort does. It turns mastery into stagnation. The song of your life begins to loop, not because you lack ambition, but because you stopped choosing the unknown. Growth always begins with a willingness to sound off key again, to be awkward, to risk failure. But most people spend their lives perfecting comfort instead of exploring potential. The paradox of comfort is that it gives us what we crave most under security, while quietly stealing what we need most, freedom. Security promises stability, but it comes at the cost of expansion. You can't chase freedom while clinging to certainty. The two pull in opposite directions. You feel that tension every time you think about changing your career, but stay because it's stable. You feel it when you consider taking a chance on your dream, but tell yourself, now isn't the right time. The truth is, comfort is never satisfied. It always asks for one more day, one more excuse, one more delay. It's easy to mistake activity for progress. You tell yourself you're improving because you're refining routines, making plans, optimizing systems. But growth isn't about getting better at what's familiar. It's about daring to step beyond it. A person can spend years mastering mediocrity simply because it feels safe. Comfort, after all, doesn't demand courage. It rewards consistency. But consistency without curiosity becomes a cage. You stop asking questions like, what could I become? And start asking, what could I lose? The mind shifts from creation to preservation. You start defending your limits instead of expanding them. There's a haunting question that lingers in the quiet hours of reflection. Am I growing or just getting better at staying comfortable? It's not an accusation. It's an awakening. To ask it honestly is to face yourself without the mask of excuses. It's realizing that the very systems you built to make life easier have started making you smaller. And here lies the heart of the quiet war, the invisible conflict between comfort and growth. Comfort whispers, stay safe, while growth whispers, step forward. Both voices sound rational, but only one will lead you to who you're meant to be. This war isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself in chaos or crisis. It's subtle, fought in the micro decisions of your day. Do you take the risk or play it safe? Do you speak up or stay silent? Do you create or just consume? Comfort wins each time you choose ease over evolution. Growth wins each time you lean into uncertainty, even slightly. The battlefield is not external. It's your mind, your habits, your choices. Every decision tilts the balance toward one side or the other. As Morgan Housel once wrote, "Things that have never happened before happen all the time." Growth is born in that space, the unpredictable, the uncomfortable, the uncertain. Yet most people spend their lives trying to eliminate those very experiences. They call it stability, but it's really avoidance. True peace isn't the absence of chaos. It's the ability to stand in it without losing yourself. The irony is that the more you chase safety, the less safe you feel, because deep down your soul knows you're hiding. Think of the moments in your life when you felt most alive. They were rarely the easiest ones. They were the moments that stretched you, scared you, demanded something new from you. Whether it was taking a leap of faith, ending something that no longer served you, or stepping into a challenge that felt too big. Those were the moments that revealed your strength. Discomfort didn't destroy you. It defined you. Growth is not an external pursuit. It's an internal awakening. The realization that what you fear losing is often what's keeping you small. This is the quiet war between comfort and growth. It's not a battle of good versus evil, but of protection versus potential. Comfort wants to preserve who you are. Growth wants to uncover who you could be. One offers relief, the other offers revelation. The truth is you need both, comfort to rest, growth to rise. But the tragedy is when rest becomes residence, when temporary peace becomes permanent pause. So as we begin this journey, ask yourself, not from judgment but from honesty, where in your life have you mistaken safety for peace? Where have you stopped growing because you stopped being uncomfortable? The answers may surprise you, but they will also set you free. Because once you see comfort for what it is, a beautiful, dangerous disguise, you can finally choose growth not as a punishment, but as a path back to yourself. And perhaps in that choice, you'll find that what you were seeking in safety was never safety at all. It was the quiet confidence that comes only when you dare to grow. There is a quiet persuasion at work in most lives, a soft voice that promises safety, ease, and predictable outcomes. It speaks kindly like an old friend, and its language is patient. You've earned this. Rest. Be sensible. That voice is comfort, and it is perhaps the most persuasive illusion life can offer. It dresses itself in sensible phrases and wise-sounding rationales, and over time, it convinces you that peace is the same as ease. Yet beneath that quiet promise, something more dangerous is happening. Comfort, by its very nature, narrows the range of your possible selves until you no longer recognize the person you once aspired to become. Most of us have been taught to prize stability. We talk about building systems, establishing routines, and finding balance as if those things are the end game. But stability is not the same as fulfillment. True peace, the kind that hums under your bones and makes the small things feel meaningful, is not found in the absence of challenge. It is found in alignment with purpose. Purpose, by definition, stretches you. It asks you to show up bigger than yesterday. It pulls you into discomfort because it requires growth. And growth rarely arrives wrapped in comfort. As Morgan Housel observed, you can be wrong half the time and still make money. What matters is how you behave. The same applies to living. Behavior under pressure, not comfort alone, determines whether you become more or remain the same. Imagine a seed buried beneath the earth. From the surface, nothing seems to change. To the eye, the seed is stationary, inert, perhaps even lifeless. But beneath the soil, pressure builds. The seed must split, its shell fracture, its network shift. To the surface, this looks like destruction. Within, it is the necessary violence of becoming. That image is not a romantic metaphor. It is a biological truth. Growth often requires breaking. The habits, identities, and small conveniences that once kept you safe become the shell that must crack. Pain, strain, and disorientation are not signs of the wrong direction. They are the sound of transformation in progress. We are quick to label friction as failure, a stalled project, an awkward first attempt, a public misstep. The mind reads these events as proof of incompetence. Yet friction is often the very mechanism that forges strength. When you first tried to learn to drive, to save money, to speak in public, there was discomfort, missed cues, and imperfect outcomes. Those initial failures were not indictments. They were tuition fees for a future skill. James Clear reminds us that you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. The implication is gentle but profound. If your system is designed only to preserve comfort, your goals will wither on the vine. If your system invites small, disciplined discomfort, then growth compounds quietly over time. The tragedy of modern life is not that people choose comfort. The tragedy is that they mistake it for living. You rest once, you deserve it. And then you rest again and again until rest becomes residence. You tell yourself you are being mature, patient, or balanced, and these words become a fixture that obscures the truth. The life you protect most carefully is sometimes the life you betray. Comfort rewards you with immediate relief and a false sense of mastery. It gives you tidy mornings and predictable outcomes, while the edges of your capacities erode like cliffs under gentle tides. The slow work of erosion is easy to ignore, because it asks for nothing dramatic. You do not notice the narrowing until one day you wake and the horizon has shrunk. This is not to condemn comfort entirely. Rest, healing, and predictability have their place. The problem arises when the very thing intended as respite becomes the architecture of your life. When every decision is filtered through the lens of, will this feel safe? You stop choosing the unknown and start defending the known. Protection becomes preservation, and preservation calcifies into fear. The mind, always seeking to avoid pain, will trade away possibility for predictability every time, unless you deliberately reorient it. The skills required for that reorientation are not heroic in the cinematic sense. They are small, steady practices. The willingness to take one more imperfect step, the discipline to do the uncomfortable daily work, the humility to be a beginner again in service of becoming. There is a practical logic to this philosophical idea. Growth and comfort live on opposite ends of the same lever. Every move toward one naturally reduces the other. When you invest in safety, emotionally, financially, or socially, you decrease exposure to surprise, and with that decrease comes a narrower bandwidth for learning. When you invest in growth, you increase exposure to uncertainty and with it, the capacity for adaptation and wealth in both life and money. Napoleon Hill once wrote, "Strength and growth come only through continuous effort and struggle." It is not a call to romanticize suffering. It is an invitation to recognize struggle as the medium of transformation, the raw material from which new capacities are carved. Sooner or later, every life encounters this truth. You cannot build a lasting sense of purpose from a foundation of avoidance. The systems that serve you must include friction by design. You need structures that push you gently beyond what feels comfortable, savings plans that require sacrifice, morning routines that demand presence, conversations that require vulnerability. These small edges of discomfort do not ruin your life. They expand it. The question you face today is not whether comfort is nice. It is whether comfort is becoming your ceiling. If it is, then the real work begins. Learning to court small doses of discomfort, to treat friction as feedback, and to see the cracking of the seed not as loss, but as necessary becoming. Let this be a quiet challenge rather than a judgment. Look at one area of your life where stability has quietly assumed the throne, and ask what might happen if you allowed a little more uncertainty. The answer will not come as a thunderclap. It will arrive as a series of small, steady adjustments that over months and years change the shape of a life. This is the paradox we inherit and the choice we must make: to live safely within a narrowing shell, or to accept the breaking, knowing that inside the break is the possibility of new growth. What begins as rest often turns into resistance. The comfort you earn, if left unchecked, quietly becomes the cage you build. It happens slowly, almost imperceptibly. You tell yourself you've worked hard and deserve a break. And you do. But then the break extends a little longer. The pause becomes a pattern. And soon, without ever meaning to, you realize that the thing you once saw as a moment of relief has become a way of living. A life arranged around the avoidance of risk, of strain, of uncertainty. What began as self-care turns into self-containment. Comfort has a clever way of disguising itself as wisdom. It whispers that you're being mature, sensible, responsible, that you're making decisions from a place of balance and patience. But often beneath those noble words lies a quieter truth: fear. Fear of embarrassment, fear of losing what you've built, fear of stepping outside the version of yourself others have come to expect, Fear wears many masks: rationality, caution, even humility. But its purpose is the same: to keep you exactly where you are. Growth, however, has no patience for such disguises. It demands that you see clearly, that you strip away the comforting language and look honestly at the cost of staying safe. Every day you delay the pursuit of your potential, a small part of you dims. It's not dramatic at first. It's the subtle fading of excitement, the quiet erosion of curiosity. You stop asking what if and start saying maybe later. That later becomes the indefinite holding pattern of an unlived life. You may still be busy, still successful, still outwardly accomplished, but deep down you know the truth. You're maintaining, not growing. You're repeating, not evolving. And maintenance, when mistaken for progress, is the slowest form of decline. Real growth demands humility, the kind that humbles the ego and cracks open the illusion of control. It asks you to look foolish again, to admit you don't know as much as you thought. Think of any meaningful pursuit: starting a business, learning a new skill, repairing a broken relationship, or facing a financial setback. Every one of these moments begins with awkwardness, uncertainty, and imperfection. You will say the wrong things, make the wrong moves, miscalculate, overreach. But that is the very process of becoming capable. To grow is to endure temporary incompetence on the road to deeper competence. It is to accept that mastery begins in messiness. Our culture prizes confidence, but undervalues humility. Yet humility is the soil in which confidence truly grows. Without it, confidence becomes arrogance, fragile, performative, and easily threatened. With it, confidence becomes resilience, a quiet knowing that even if you stumble, you'll learn your way forward. When you can look at your own discomfort without judgment, you begin to see that failure isn't fatal. It's formative. The person who has the courage to fail often and visibly eventually outpaces the person who hides behind preparation and safety. Emotional. Discipline is the unseen force that separates those who expand from those who remain. It's not about suppressing fear or pretending it doesn't exist. It's about walking forward while it whispers in your ear. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the mastery of movement in its presence. Every time you act despite fear, whether it's making that difficult phone call asking for help, or taking the first step toward an uncertain dream, you rewrite the story your mind tells about what's possible. Fear, once faced, becomes feedback. It tells you not to stop, but to pay attention. It becomes a signpost pointing toward where your next growth lies. Consider the entrepreneur who hesitated for years before launching a product. He told himself he was waiting for the perfect timing, the perfect plan. But perfection never came. One day, exhausted by his own hesitation, he launched anyway, imperfect, incomplete, but in motion. The first version failed. The second improved. The third began to work. In less than a year, he had achieved more progress than in the previous 5 combined. What changed wasn't his resources or intelligence, it was his relationship with fear. Once he stopped treating fear as a stop sign and started treating it as a signal, everything accelerated. A single act of courage, even a small one, can unravel years of hesitation. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as saying yes to something your mind has long said no to. Taking that small leap creates a shift that ripples through your psychology. Suddenly, decisions feel lighter. You begin to trust yourself again. Energy returns. Where there was once analysis paralysis, there's now motion. Life starts to feel expansive again because you are expanding. You begin to see that courage is not a personality trait reserved for the few. It's a muscle available to everyone. And like any muscle, it grows through use. Those who dare to choose discomfort begin to experience life with a different texture. Decisions sharpen because they are no longer clouded by avoidance. Time feels richer because it's spent in alignment with growth, not preservation. Relationships deepen because vulnerability replaces performance. Even finances, often the arena where fear most disguises itself, begin to shift. You stop clinging to the illusion of security and start building real resilience. Saving intentionally, investing intelligently, spending according to values rather than vanity. Courage doesn't just change your emotions, it changes your economics. Because when you stop living defensively, you start living creatively, and creativity compounds. The doorway to progress is narrow and uncomfortable, and that's by design. If it were wide and effortless, everyone would walk through it and it would lead nowhere new. Growth requires a kind of sacred narrowing, a moment where you must confront your excuses, release your comforts, and decide what you value most. Will you choose the known pain of stagnation or the uncertain ache of becoming? Both are hard, but only one leads you somewhere worth going. Every person who has built a meaningful life, whether in wealth, purpose, or peace, has walked through that narrow doorway. They've faced the trembling, stepped anyway, and discovered that on the other side of fear, the world widens in ways they never imagined. If you've been standing at that doorway, waiting for certainty before you move, understand this. Certainty never arrives first. Movement does. The act of stepping forward is what generates the clarity you're waiting for. Safety is static. Progress is kinetic. You can't think your way into growth. You have to walk into it. And once you do, once you let discomfort become your companion instead of your enemy, you'll find something extraordinary. The fear that once held you back transforms into fuel. It becomes the quiet reminder that you are alive, expanding, and exactly where you're meant to be, no longer trapped by safety, but propelled by purpose. There is an ancient echo inside you that predates smartphones, mortgages, and office buildings. Long before spreadsheets and side hustles, our ancestors learned to read danger in the wind and to move away from what might kill them. That instinct, the pull towards safety, served a purpose then. It kept bodies alive and tribes together. Today, the predators are subtler. They wear the faces of uncertainty, rejection, long odds, and the possibility of looking foolish. The battlefield has shifted from forests and cliffs to boardrooms, relationships, and the quiet architecture of daily habit. But the instinct remains. It whispers that staying still is safer, that familiarity is synonymous with survival. Yet when the threat is emotional or reputational rather than physical, the instinct can mislead us, steering us away from the very experiences that would expand who we can become. We now avoid not lions, but loss of face. Not storms, but the discomfort of being judged. These invisible predators feel as real as any animal because they threaten what we value most: our belonging, our identity, our sense of competence. The avoidance looks rational on the surface. We tell ourselves we're prudent, waiting until the conditions are perfect, calibrating risk like a responsible steward. But beneath that logic often lies a quieter economy, a ledger of small trades where we exchange potential for predictability. We trade a new idea, an awkward conversation, or a risky investment for the steady heartbeat of what we already know. Over time, those trades compound into a life that feels safe but flattened, like a field never planted, always waiting for a season that never comes. Productivity becomes the common camouflage for this avoidance, an elegant disguise that turns distraction into dignity. You can recognize it: the person who is constantly busy, whose calendar is full, whose to-do lists multiply while the important, scary things sit in the margin. Busyness convinces you the day is well spent, that you are doing the work of a life when in truth you might be running from the harder, longer work of real change. There's comfort in motion when motion feels like meaning. But motion can be a clever anesthetic. We tidy inboxes instead of starting projects. We attend workshops instead of creating. And in the end, we measure activity instead of impact. The irony is cruel. Effort becomes a substitute for progress. And the more efficient we become at staying busy, the farther we drift from becoming. The mind loves a plan because plans offer the illusion of control. Logic sits at the table with fear and says, "Let us wait until we are ready." Emotion stands on the other side and pleads, "Move now, even if imperfect." The trouble is, readiness is usually a byproduct of motion rather than its precursor. You do not arrive at courage. You cultivate it by stepping into situations that demand it. The first version of anything, and the first draft, the first pitch, the first awkward conversation will expose your limits. But those exposures are not proof that you should stop. They are the very mechanism by which you grow. Every movement generates information. Every attempt sculpts your competence. Holding out for a perfect moment often means holding back the only moments that will ever teach you what you need to learn. There is a contradiction at the heart of modern ambition. We insist on clarity before action. Yet clarity is forged by action. You imagine the path should be visible from the start, that the map should be fully drawn before you take the first step. In practice, the map reveals itself under your feet as you move. This is not an excuse for recklessness, but a call to recalibrate what constitutes wise risk. Wisdom is not the absence of mistakes, but the ability to interpret them and iterate. When you treat each small failure as data rather than doom, you transform fear into a teacher. The paradox resolves itself. Action begets clarity, and clarity refines future action. The brave do not escape uncertainty. They learn to navigate it. Avoidance masquerades as control, but it is a slow corrosion of self-trust. Each hesitation chips away at the inner conviction that you can handle the consequences of your choices. You begin to believe that the safest life is the one that minimizes surprises, and in doing so you minimize your own capacity to adapt. There's a subtle tyranny in that. The more you avoid, the more fragile you become when avoidance fails you, as it always will, because life is unpredictable. True resilience is built not by insulating yourself from the world, but by engaging it, repeatedly and honestly. Self-trust grows when you act and survive, when you speak and are heard, when you risk and learn. It accrues in small increments until one day you recognize a different person in the mirror, someone who has been tested and therefore trusted themselves. So the question arrives, quiet and unavoidable. If the safety you've constructed costs you the life you might live, is it truly safety at all? You cannot ask this without feeling the sting of accountability, because it suggests you are complicit in your own limits. But that sting can be a mercy. It wakes you. The point is not to abandon comfort wholesale, but to reconsider its position in your life. Rest and restoration are necessary, but they should not become the default posture. Let discomfort serve as a signal rather than a verdict. Let avoidance be the prompt for inquiry. What am I protecting and at what cost? When you approach your choices from that place of honest curiosity, the answer often nudges you toward a small, brave step, a conversation, a prototype, a shift in spending, and with that step, your world begins its slow, steady widening. Waiting to feel ready is one of life's most elegant traps, a mirage that flatters your patience while quietly stealing your momentum. You tell yourself you're preparing, that you're studying, saving, or waiting for the right alignment of planets, when in truth you are rehearsing a future that will never arrive precisely as imagined. The mind is a clever architect of reasons. It builds scaffolding of planning to avoid the tremor of the first step. That first step is always imperfect, awkward, and exposed. Yet it is also the step that creates the conditions for readiness, because readiness, more often than not, is the consequence of movement rather than its prerequisite. People conflate readiness with certainty, as if the world ever hands out guarantees stamped and signed. We imagine a clean path, a complete map, a set of assurances that will make risk bearable. But life rarely obliges us with such clarity. Instead, it invites us to decide and see. Decision is the engine of clarity, and action is its fuel. You do not summon certainty by awaiting it. You generate it by acting, by testing hypotheses, receiving feedback, and iterating. In the small cycles of trying and adjusting, the fog lifts. Not because the future changed, but because your information did. The moment of decision reframes the unknown into a series of manageable experiments. The mind craves guarantees because fear seeks predictability. The soul craves growth because yearning seeks expansion. Those two impulses seldom sing the same song. The intellect will often try to negotiate safety into every plan. What if this fails? Who will judge me? What will I lose? Meanwhile, some quiet part of you, often spoken in the language of restlessness, whispers to try anyway. That whisper is worth hearing, because it is the signal of desire, not mere impulse. When you privilege the mind's demand for certainty over the soul's call to grow, you may preserve a neat life, but you risk a diminished one. Growth asks for a tolerance of ambiguity, the willingness to move forward with partial understanding and imperfect tools. The illusion of readiness keeps dreams in draft mode and goals on hold. Like manuscripts that never reach the publisher, you become an expert in preparation. You take the courses, read the books, optimize the plans, and yet the project remains a phantom on the to-do list. It becomes easy to measure progress by activity rather than outcome, to mistake preparation for the thing itself. This is a slow and seductive theft. Years pass while drafts pile up, and the life you might have lived becomes an exercise in deferred possibility. The cost is subtle at first. a quiet regret that shows up as a thought in the shower, a longing in moments of idle evening. But over time it calcifies into a deeper dissatisfaction that no amount of planning can fix. The emotional cost of postponement is quiet but devastating. It erodes self-respect in ways that are almost invisible. Imagine the small ledger of promises you keep to yourself, the morning practice, the difficult conversation, the investment you intended to make. Each time you announce postponement with good reasons and careful logic, you debit that ledger further. Self-respect accumulates like interest on a savings account. And just as interest compounds, so does the habit of keeping your word. Conversely, habitually delaying action compounds a different economy, one of avoidance, and the balance sheet becomes a record of what you did not try. That slow fading of trust in yourself is often the hardest poverty to recover from, because it is both cause and consequence of inaction. But growth does not punish, it refines. The person who acts imperfectly and learns becomes, over time, someone who moves with wiser purpose. Courage, like any muscle, adapts through use. Take the first awkward presentation you gave, or the first sale you attempted. Those moments felt clumsy and exposed, and yet they were the tuition payments for competence. Each attempt, each small failure layered new understanding over old fear, until what once terrified you became merely ordinary. In financial life, the same principle applies. The investor who begins with modest, imperfect choices and refines strategy through experience will often outpace the one who waits for a perfect market that never appears. A single risk taken in faith can unravel years of hesitation, not through drama, but through the steady accumulation of evidence that you can weather consequence. Sometimes the leap is large. Sometimes it is a modest yes that stretches you a little beyond your comfort. Perhaps it is starting a conversation that needs to be had, launching a project without waiting for full funding, or investing a small portion of savings into a new skill. Whatever the size, the simple act of stepping creates a new identity. You are the kind of person who does things that matter rather than the kind of person who plans indefinitely. That shift in self-perception alters future choices. Energy returns because hope is no longer theoretical. It is enacted. In the stillness that follows fear, a quiet realization arrives. You were never waiting for readiness. Readiness was waiting for you. The clarity you sought does not precede movement. It arrives because you moved. The paradox is gentle and generous. Stepping forward does not abandon wisdom. It generates it. So consider the tender invitation here, not a reckless tossing of caution, but a reorientation of where you look for permission. Instead of waiting for everything to align, ask what small imperfect step you can take today that will produce new information and open new doors. In that movement, readiness meets you halfway, and the long work of becoming begins in earnest. Discomfort is the truest mirror. It shows you where you still hide and what you still believe about yourself. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid it, decorating their comfort zones with justifications and distractions. But discomfort is not the enemy, it is a compass. It points to the very places in you that are still asking for growth, the places that have not yet learned to trust your own strength. Every time you feel that knot in your stomach, that hesitation in your chest, it is life holding up a mirror and asking, will you meet yourself here, or will you turn away again? We're conditioned to associate discomfort with danger. Our ancestors needed that association. Discomfort meant hunger, storms, predators, and pain. Avoiding it increased survival. But the landscape has changed. The threats are now psychological, not physical. Today, discomfort often arises not from what can harm you, but from what can help you evolve. When you feel anxious before a big decision, nervous before a presentation, or uncertain about starting something new, that's not life warning you to retreat. It's life inviting you to stretch. The modern danger lies not in discomfort itself, but in what happens when we refuse to face it. The slow suffocation of potential that comes from staying small. When faced with struggle, the mind says escape, but the heart whispers expand. The mind, loyal to its job of protecting you, sees discomfort and sounds the alarm. It says, "This is unsafe. Go back to what you know." But the heart, the deeper intelligence that understands purpose, knows that the edge of discomfort is where growth begins. Consider the seed. It must crack open to sprout. The shell must break for life to emerge. To the seed, that breaking would feel like destruction, but it's actually creation. Human transformation works the same way. The moments that feel like you re-breaking are often the ones in which you re-blooming. The shift happens the moment you stop seeing discomfort as danger and start seeing it as dialogue. Discomfort is a conversation between who you are and who you're becoming. It asks, are you willing to shed the version of yourself that can't handle this yet? When you listen to it, not with fear but with curiosity, the message changes. That tightness before a big leap isn't saying stop, it's saying prepare. The anxiety before change isn't a warning, it's a signal that something meaningful is underway. Growth always comes with friction, but when you interpret that friction as communication rather than catastrophe, you reclaim your power. You no longer need to escape it, you can learn from it. True growth doesn't demand confidence, it builds it. Confidence is not a prerequisite for taking action. It is the residue that action leaves behind. Every small act of courage, every moment where you lean into discomfort instead of retreating, reshapes how you see yourself. You begin to realize, I can do hard things. That single belief changes everything. Think of the first time you learned a new skill, whether it was driving, public speaking, or managing money. You didn't start confident, you started clumsy. But each repetition, each small win, slowly rewired your identity from someone who tries to someone who can. Discomfort, then, is not proof of weakness. It's the forge in which strength is made. And something extraordinary happens when your inner world stops resisting pain. The outer world begins to respond differently. People sense your composure. Opportunities seem to appear more often, not because life suddenly became easier, but because you've become more grounded. The storms don't stop. We just learned how to walk through them without flinching. In relationships, work, or finances, the person who can stay steady amid discomfort becomes magnetic. Others are drawn to stability, to those who move with calm even when circumstances shake. Discomfort, once an obstacle, becomes your training ground for grace under pressure. Freedom, then, is not the absence of discomfort, but the mastery of it, walking calmly into what once frightened you. Imagine standing at the edge of what scares you most. Failure, rejection, uncertainty. The old instinct might scream run, but mastery whispers stay. Stay long enough to see that the fear has edges, that the discomfort has texture, and that you are larger than both. Mastery doesn't mean you no longer feel fear. It means you can act in spite of it. You become like a sailor who no longer curses the waves, but learns their rhythm. In that rhythm lies your liberation, not from difficulty, but from your dependence on comfort. Over time, this mastery creates a kind of quiet power. You start to trust yourself deeply, not because everything goes right, but because you've learned that even when it doesn't, you can handle it. You've learned that failure isn't fatal, that rejection doesn't define you, and that uncertainty is simply unclaimed possibility. When you stop fighting discomfort, you begin to collaborate with it. You use it as data, as feedback, as a compass pointing toward the next evolution of who you are. Life's challenges no longer feel like punishment. They feel like invitations to grow more capable, more wise, more whole. From this awareness, growth becomes less about achievement and more about alignment. A quiet unfolding of who you're meant to be. You stop chasing validation or external milestones to prove your worth. Instead, you begin to measure success by your willingness to stay present in discomfort, by how fully you can show up even when the outcome is uncertain. The irony is that this very surrender, the choice to stop controlling and start aligning, often accelerates both inner peace and outer success. Money, relationships, health, purpose, all begin to flow more freely when you're no longer constricted by fear of feeling. Discomfort becomes the teacher, not the test. It guides you toward what truly matters, what still needs healing, and what new version of yourself is ready to emerge. You start to welcome it, even thank it, because it shows you that you're still alive, still stretching, still evolving. Life will always contain discomfort, but so does growth, truth, and transformation. The difference lies in how you interpret it. To fear discomfort is to fear your own becoming. To embrace it is to meet your fullest potential face to face. So, the next time you feel that unease, that ache of growth pressing against your limits, pause and listen. Ask what it's trying to show you. Somewhere within that tension lies your next chapter, waiting patiently for your courage to turn the page. Because transformation was never about escaping pain. It was about learning to let it refine you. And when you do, discomfort stops being something you survive and becomes something that sets you free. Many chase success hoping it will bring peace, only to discover that peace cannot be earned through achievement. We grow up believing that once we reach a certain level of wealth, status, or recognition, a deep calm will finally arrive, as if peace were waiting at the finish line of accomplishment. But it never quite works that way. The moment one goal is reached, another emerges, slightly higher, slightly harder. The mind, conditioned to seek, cannot rest in having. It needs something more to pursue. And so, even amid success, an unease lingers, the quiet whisper that says, "You should be further by now." True peace is not a reward, it's a responsibility. It's something you cultivate, not something you chase. Many high achievers realize this too late, after climbing the mountain only to feel emptier at the top. They discover that the summit does not give peace. It simply exposes the state of mind they carried all along. If you were restless before success, you'll be restless after it. The scenery changes, but the inner landscape remains the same. And this realization is what drives a deeper transformation. The understanding that success without stillness is just noise. External growth without internal grounding becomes motion without meaning. The world applauds activity, productivity, and progress. And yet, it rarely asks why we're moving in the first place. We fill our calendars, chase metrics, and optimize every minute believing that movement equals momentum. But busyness and growth are not synonymous. A tree doesn't grow by constantly stretching, it grows by staying rooted. Likewise, external success must be anchored in inner stillness, a sense of grounded clarity that prevents achievement from turning into exhaustion. When you live ungrounded, everything becomes reactionary. You start measuring your worth by the next accomplishment, the next deal, the next validation. Life becomes a cycle of doing more to feel like more. But stillness interrupts that pattern. It invites you to pause, to breathe, to remember that you are not what you achieve. You are the awareness behind all achievement. Stillness allows your success to be experienced rather than merely pursued. Without it, even abundance feels like lack. A wise paradox unfolds here. The more you let go of control, the more life begins to align in your favor. This doesn't mean you stop caring or stop striving. It means you stop forcing. Control is the illusion that everything must go according to plan for life to be okay. But the truth is, most of life's greatest outcomes are born from moments we never planned. Chance meetings, unexpected failures, detours that became turning points. Letting go of control is not passive surrender, it's active trust. It's acknowledging that your role is not to manage every detail, but to show up with intention and let life co-create with you. When you grip too tightly, you block the very flow that would carry you forward. Consider the entrepreneur who micromanages every aspect of their business, terrified of mistakes, exhausted by perfection. They may achieve results, but at the cost of freedom and creativity. Now contrast that with the leader who delegates, trusts their team, and focuses on vision. The latter works with life, not against it. Their success grows with less resistance, because it's rooted in alignment, not anxiety. Control creates tension. Trust creates expansion. Consider the archer. Power comes not from force, but from stillness before the release. The archer doesn't rush the shot. They draw the bow, breathe, focus, and in the quiet moment before action, everything aligns. The target, the tension, the timing, all meet in a single breath. The lesson is profound. True strength doesn't come from constant striving, but from the capacity to hold still under pressure. Stillness gathers energy, impatience disperses it. The archer teaches us that success is not about pushing harder, but about waiting wisely. In our modern world, we've confused stillness with stagnation. We think slowing down means falling behind. But the most effective people in any field, from investors to athletes to creators, Understand that rest and reflection are part of mastery. Warren Buffett spends hours thinking, not reacting. Michael Jordan visualized before he played. Great thinkers throughout history took long walks to allow their ideas to breathe. They understood what many overlook. The mind cannot create meaning in chaos. Stillness is not the absence of progress, it's the foundation of it. True mastery lies in doing less from fear and more from clarity. Most of our effort is wasted, not because we don't work hard enough, but because we work from the wrong energy, from insecurity, comparison, or haste. Fear-driven action exhausts, while clarity-driven action amplifies. When your effort is guided by intention instead of anxiety, every move carries more power. You stop chasing everything that glitters and start choosing what truly matters. That is the shift from effort to effectiveness, from panic to purpose. Clarity is born in stillness. It's in the quiet moments, the early morning before the world wakes, the walk without your phone, the space between one breath and the next, where life's true direction becomes audible. Without that stillness, we act blindly, mistaking activity for advancement. But when you learn to listen inwardly, decisions become cleaner, simpler, and more powerful. You begin to trust your intuition, that subtle compass that doesn't shout, but always points true. And slowly, the quiet war inside begins to fade. The war between ambition and peace, between doing and being. You realize that peace and progress were never enemies. They were meant to walk together. Progress without peace burns you out. Peace without progress leaves you stagnant. But when the two unite, you find flow, a calm momentum where effort feels natural and purpose feels alive. You no longer need to choose between success and serenity. You can move forward calmly, confidently, and consciously. In this still understanding, you discover something beautiful, that life's greatest power doesn't come from acceleration, but from alignment. You start to measure your growth, not by how fast you move, but by how deeply you move, how aligned your actions are with your values, how often your decisions reflect your truth. That's the kind of progress that lasts, the kind that compounds quietly over years. It's not about chasing more. It's about becoming more deliberate, more awake, more at peace with the unfolding of life. So pause for a moment. Feel the rhythm of your breath. The same intelligence that keeps your heart beating, that moves the tides and turns the seasons, is moving through you. You don't have to force the river. You only have to stop fighting its flow. Success and stillness are not opposites. They are partners in your evolution. One gives you direction, the other gives you depth, and together, they lead you not just to achievement, but to fulfillment, that rare and steady state where you are no longer chasing life but finally living it. The war between comfort and growth was never meant to be a battle of winners and losers. It was never about choosing sides, as if one path were inherently noble and the other inherently weak. In truth, the tension exists for a reason: to teach, to guide, to illuminate the choices that define who we are and who we can become. Comfort is not the enemy. It is a reference point, a reminder of what has kept us alive, what has protected us from the storm. Growth is not a tyrant. It is an invitation, a whisper from the future urging us to stretch beyond the familiar and embrace what is possible. The quiet war is, at its essence, a conversation between the two forces, a dialogue that demands listening, reflection, and discernment. The mastery lies not in silencing one voice, but in understanding the message of both. Comfort carries the memories of your past, the routines, the habits, the decisions that brought you to this point. It reminds you of where you've been, the lessons learned, and the stability you earned through diligence and care. Growth, in contrast, is forward-looking. It points toward potential, toward the unexplored, toward the self you have yet to meet. The paradox is striking. To honor both requires wisdom, the kind of wisdom that recognizes when to rest and when to rise. A soldier who charges without pause will falter. One who never moves will never advance. Life, like battle, is measured not by constant action, but by strategic, conscious engagement. Listening to both comfort and growth allows us to navigate the tension gracefully, transforming inner conflict into clarity. As you begin to recognize this dialogue, The restlessness that once stirred unease within you begins to transform. It no longer drives you toward frantic escape or desperate busyness. Instead, it becomes awareness, a sense of being awake, present, and attuned to the rhythm of your own life. You no longer feel compelled to flee discomfort. You no longer perceive risk as purely threatening. The same sensations that once made you recoil, the hesitation, the tightness in the chest, the whisper of doubt, now feel like a signal, a compass guiding you toward alignment. In this space, discomfort is no longer the enemy. It is sacred. It is the teacher you may have feared, showing you the edges of your current self and inviting you to expand beyond them. Paulo Coelho once wrote, "If you're brave enough to say goodbye, life will reward you with a new hello." Here, bravery is not a grand leap, but a daily practice of listening to the message's hidden intention. This awareness begins to clarify a fundamental law. True expansion in life or in wealth follows courage, not convenience. The path that asks for ease, predictability, and comfort rarely leads to growth. Every meaningful achievement, every financial milestone, personal breakthrough, or profound relationship required stepping into discomfort. The entrepreneur who launches a business without guaranteed success, the investor who makes a bold move despite uncertainty, the artist who shares a vulnerable creation, all of these acts are grounded in courage, not in the illusion of readiness or the comfort of routine. And yet, the act of choosing courage reshapes the inner landscape. It rewires the way you approach decisions, how you interpret setbacks, and how you measure your own potential. Convenience may feel safe in the short term, but it silently erodes the muscles of bravery, leaving you strong in routine, but weak in possibility. As courage becomes habitual, a remarkable transformation occurs. The heart softens even as the mind steadies. Anxiety over outcomes loosens its grip. Fear no longer dictates every choice. You begin to trust yourself again, the deep, unshakable confidence that arises from having faced hesitation, acted anyway, and survived. This trust is different from arrogance or certainty. It is the quiet knowledge that, whatever happens, you are capable of navigating it. Decisions that once seemed heavy become lighter, not because the challenges diminish, but because your capacity for handling them grows. Each small act of bravery compounds, creating a reservoir of confidence and calm that informs every step forward. The journey, interestingly, circles back to where it began. The restlessness, the unease, the silent tug of dissatisfaction, they were never entirely eliminated, they were transformed. You encounter the same moments of discomfort, the same choices between ease and growth, but you walk differently now, lighter, clearer, freer. The difference is subtle yet profound. You no longer react out of fear or habit. You respond with awareness and intentionality. Life is no longer a series of battles to survive. It becomes a continuous dialogue in which you participate consciously, shaping your trajectory rather than being swept along by circumstance. Morgan Housel captures this truth when he says, "Controlling your time is the highest dividend you can earn." In this sense, choosing alignment over compulsion is the ultimate form of control. What emerges from this integration is coherence, the alignment of thought, feeling, and action. Comfort and growth cease to feel opposed. They coexist in a dynamic balance, each informing the other. You rest when rest is needed, and rise when rising serves your purpose. You embrace discomfort not to prove something to the world, but to expand the horizon of what you know yourself to be capable of. The once thrumming anxiety of "am I enough" quiets into the calm observation of "I am becoming." The inner dialogue that was once a battlefield becomes a conversation, rich in insight and nuance, where every challenge is an opportunity and every pause a chance to recalibrate. In this state of integration, the stakes feel simultaneously smaller and larger. Smaller, because fear has lost its ability to dominate decisions. Larger, because you see the vastness of what is possible when courage guides your choices. The small daily acts, sending that email, making that investment, speaking your truth, setting a boundary, are no longer minor inconveniences, but essential exercises in alignment. Over time, they compound, shaping not only the life you live externally, but also the person you are internally. The external manifestations of wealth, success, and peace now reflect your inner coherence, rather than a scramble for approval or validation. And finally, there is freedom. Not freedom from responsibility or challenge, but freedom within it. The lessons learned from the tension between comfort and growth create a space where choice is deliberate, not reactionary. You navigate life with a quiet confidence, aware that peace does not lie in avoidance, and success does not lie in control. Instead, they meet in the middle, in the conscious acts of alignment, courage, and presence. You no longer chase one at the expense of the other. You honor both, understanding that they are intertwined threads of a single tapestry. The journey that once felt like a conflict now feels like coherence, a harmony of rest and rise, stillness and expansion, ease and courage. This is the ultimate teaching of the quiet war, that growth and comfort are not enemies, but teachers, guiding you toward alignment. To listen to both is to cultivate wisdom, to act with courage while honoring the rhythms of your life, and to expand without losing the sense of yourself. The same discomfort that once felt threatening now feels sacred, the whisper of the life you were meant to live. And as you walk forward, lighter, clearer, freer, you carry with you the knowledge that the dialogue between comfort and growth is not a war to be won, but a balance to be maintained, the dance of becoming fully, courageously, and consciously alive. Looking back, it becomes clear that the hardships you endured were never punishments in disguise. They were not cosmic retributions or arbitrary setbacks. They were preparation, carefully calibrated to shape the resilience, awareness, and discernment you now carry quietly within you. Each moment of struggle, each day that felt unbearably heavy, was forging a subtle strength, the kind that doesn't announce itself with fanfare, but whispers quietly in the depths of your being. There is a peculiar grace in realizing that what once seemed cruel or unnecessary was, in fact, intentional training for the life you are now capable of leading. Pain, when seen from this perspective, is less a burden and more a guidepost, a teacher pointing toward capacities you might never have discovered otherwise. The very moments you once wished away, the long nights of uncertainty, the stumbles in your career, the relationships that faltered, were not wasted. They were shaping the contours of your inner self, building a foundation for strength that cannot be bought, borrowed, or rushed. You may not have recognized it at the time, but each discomfort was a lesson, each setback a quiet calibration. In the same way a blacksmith tempers steel with fire, life tempers your resolve through friction. James Clear reminds us that you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. In this context, your systems were the daily acts of endurance, the choices to continue despite fear, and the silent perseverance that made this transformation possible. What once felt like chaos now begins to feel like calibration. The panic, the confusion, the internal dissonance that seemed to shake you to your core. It was not aimless. Each difficulty was designed to align you more closely with your true self. Every period of doubt, every challenge that seemed insurmountable, nudged you toward clarity, toward understanding the boundaries of your own strength, the patterns of your own thinking, and the habits that no longer served your growth. You start to recognize that life's turbulence is not always a threat, but a signal, a gentle, persistent reminder that the process of becoming requires more than mere endurance. It requires attention, reflection, and courage. Fear, once a towering force shaping every decision, now appears smaller, almost compassionate. Its roar that once dictated hesitation, avoidance, and overthinking has softened into a guidepost rather than a jailer. Fear was never meant to paralyze. It was trying to protect, to signal the areas where vulnerability existed, the spaces where growth was required. In this softened perspective, the emotion that once seemed oppressive becomes instructive. You begin to perceive its boundaries, to understand that fear is a companion on the journey rather than an enemy to be destroyed. Recognizing this subtle shift transforms the internal landscape. Fear loses its dominion, and choice becomes possible once again. In this new vision of yourself, forgiveness becomes vital. You start to forgive the moments when you chose comfort over challenge, when you played safe, not out of wisdom, but out of ignorance. You forgive the hesitations, the decisions deferred, and the opportunities left unexplored. In doing so, you free yourself from the weight of self-judgment, which has often been heavier than the obstacles themselves. Napoleon Hill once observed, "Every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. By forgiving yourself, you allow those seeds to germinate, letting the lessons of the past bloom into the clarity, courage, and understanding that shape your present. Peace, you begin to realize, is not a reward for a life without struggle. It does not arrive when circumstances are perfect or when hardship disappears. Peace arrives when you stop demanding that life be easy, when you release the illusion that comfort equates to control. It is cultivated internally, through acceptance, reflection, and trust in the process of life itself. It is the quiet knowledge that struggle is temporary, that your capacity for endurance and learning is infinite, and that the journey itself carries meaning regardless of the obstacles encountered along the way. True peace is found not in the absence of challenges, but in the alignment of your mind and heart as you navigate them. And in this peace, something remarkable happens. You rediscover your power, but in a way that is different from before. This power is not about control over outcomes or dominance over circumstances or imposing your will upon the world. It is the power to trust yourself, to trust the unfolding of life, to trust that each moment, whether comfortable or challenging, carries the potential to guide you toward growth. You see that you are not merely surviving the events of your life. You are participating in a process, co-creating with the currents of existence. This trust is liberating. It transforms hesitation into action, doubt into curiosity, and fear into a compass pointing toward opportunity. As you sit with this awareness, you begin to notice the subtlety of transformation. The anxieties that once felt overwhelming now occupy less space. Decisions that were once paralyzing are now approached with quiet confidence. You understand, at a deep, embodied level, that every challenge you faced was preparing you not just for survival, but for presence, engagement, and meaningful contribution. Each act of courage, each willingness to endure discomfort, each moment you chose growth over ease, has compounded to create a reservoir of inner strength and clarity. Morgan Housel might remind us that compounding isn't limited to money. It's behavior, knowledge, and experience compounding over time. Your life too has compounded, quietly, invisibly, but irrevocably. In this space, you can observe your journey without judgment. You can see the patterns, the detours, the moments of brilliance and the moments of fear. You can appreciate the full arc of your story, not just the triumphs, but the trials, not just the successes, but the discomforts that shaped the person standing here now. This reflection brings gratitude, a gentle recognition that life's challenges were not obstacles to be resented, but invitations to become more fully yourself. The quiet power of this perspective is transformative. It is the ability to move forward with composure, to face new challenges with curiosity rather than dread, and to understand that your life is the sum of preparation, choice, and courage. Ultimately, seeing the journey anew is not a singular revelation, but a continuous practice. It is a habit of mind, a way of engaging with life that balances reflection with action, acceptance with ambition, and peace with purposeful growth. You begin to realize that the narrative of struggle and fear is not something to escape from, but a framework for understanding, integrating, and transcending. And in this space, where insight meets compassion, where reflection meets trust, you find a profound quiet. A quiet in which your power, your potential, and your purpose coexist harmoniously. It is here, in this delicate balance, that the next chapter of your life begins. Grounded in awareness, fortified by courage, and illuminated by the lessons of all that has come before. Gratitude has a quiet way of settling into the spaces anxiety once claimed. It doesn't arrive with a fanfare or a sudden epiphany. It drifts in softly, like sunlight through a window at dawn, illuminating corners of your life you had almost forgotten. When you pause and truly notice, you begin to see that even the struggles, the doubts, the nights when hope felt thin, were not meaningless. Each challenge, each moment of discomfort, each perceived failure was shaping the person you are becoming. In the stillness of reflection, you recognize that these experiences were not obstacles meant to punish you, but teachers guiding you toward a deeper understanding of yourself and your capacity for growth. Morgan Housel once noted, "No one spends money like a wealthy person. No one learns like a patient person." And in the same way, life teaches most profoundly through patience, not haste. Growth at this stage no longer carries the heavy weight of striving. It doesn't feel like a relentless pursuit of achievements or a constant struggle to prove worth. Instead, it begins to feel like a gentle remembering, a rediscovery of who you were before fear, doubt, or self-consciousness clouded your vision. The person you were, full of curiosity and quiet courage, is not lost but has been waiting beneath layers of avoidance and comfort. This awareness transforms your relationship with effort. Actions are no longer about proving something to the world, but about aligning with the values and purpose that have always resided inside you. Striving gives way to unfolding, and in that shift, there is a profound lightness, a sense of moving with life rather than against it. In this newfound rhythm, you begin to see beauty in imperfection. The cracks, the mistakes, the messy parts of life no longer feel like flaws to hide or regrets to lament. They are the textures that give your journey depth and meaning. Uncertainty, once a source of anxiety, now carries a rhythm of its own, a pulse that reminds you life is alive, unpredictable, and infinitely rich. And in the silence between milestones, in the spaces between accomplishment and expectation, you find meaning. The pauses are no longer empty. They are fertile, holding insight, perspective, and subtle joy. Paulo Coelho once observed that life is about making mistakes, and it's also about trying to be great. And in this silence, the greatness of life becomes visible precisely because it is imperfect. Humility begins to replace the urgency that once dominated your choices. You no longer feel the need to prove yourself, to rush, to grasp at validation or recognition. The compulsion to impress or perform diminishes, replaced by a deeper commitment to becoming, to cultivating the person who moves through life with clarity, integrity, and intention. This humility is not self-effacement. It is a quiet confidence rooted in experience and reflection. It allows you to act without desperation, to speak without anxiety, to engage with the world without fear of failure. In this calm, your actions are guided not by insecurity, but by a steady alignment between your values and your choices. There is a quiet joy in knowing that nothing was wasted. Every hesitation, every leap into uncertainty, every misstep and every triumph was part of your awakening. You begin to perceive the arcs of your life not as a series of disjointed events, but as a coherent narrative, one that has been sculpted by experience, tempered by challenge and illuminated by reflection. Even the moments that felt like setbacks now appear as essential components of your growth. Robert Kiyosaki once said, "It's not how much money you make, but how much money you keep, how hard it works for you, and how many generations you keep it for." And the same principle applies to your life lessons. It is not only the experiences themselves, but what you internalize from them that compounds into lasting wealth of character and consciousness. You begin to understand that real wealth is not measured in comfort or convenience, but in consciousness, in the awareness and presence with which you live. Comfort, while seductive, is fleeting. It can provide temporary relief, but it cannot cultivate insight or resilience. Consciousness, however, is enduring. It is the ability to navigate discomfort, to perceive opportunity in challenge, to find meaning in moments that once seemed mundane or intimidating. When you measure wealth in this way, the accumulation of material things or external accolades pales in comparison to the richness of awareness, the depth of understanding, and the clarity of intention you have cultivated through your journey. And in this realization, you finally exhale. This is not an exhale of surrender or resignation, but one of serenity, of release, of alignment. You can let go of the frantic need to control outcomes, to force success, to avoid discomfort. You understand that the process itself, the unfolding, the striving, the falling and rising, has been the very source of your transformation. In this moment, you are free to inhabit life with a sense of ease, not because the world has become predictable, but because you have become attuned to its rhythms. You are present, aware, and ready to engage with whatever comes next, not with panic or desperation, but with curiosity, courage, and grace. This calm after the war, this settling of gratitude and awareness, is not a destination, but a foundation. It is the ground from which your next phase of growth can emerge, not in frantic bursts, but in steady, purposeful momentum. You begin to see the interplay between past struggle and future potential, recognizing that every challenge encountered, every fear faced, and every act of courage taken has prepared you for this clarity. Life, once felt like a battlefield to survive, now feels like a canvas to navigate with intention, a symphony to listen to rather than control. And within this symphony you find harmony, a gentle, enduring alignment between your inner and outer worlds, between action and reflection, between courage and peace. In this space you understand the profound truth that growth and serenity are not adversaries, they are companions. The lessons of discomfort, the wisdom born of struggle, and the insight gained from reflection all converge into a state of calm that does not require constant achievement or external validation. You are awake to the subtle forces shaping your life, aware of your own agency, and at peace with the unfolding of your journey. Gratitude has replaced anxiety, understanding has replaced fear, and presence has replaced urgency. Here finally you experience the quiet triumph of living fully, not as someone escaping discomfort, but as someone who has integrated it, learned from it, and emerged wiser, steadier, and more alive. Comfort has a peculiar way of deceiving us. It promises serenity, whispers that all is well, and encourages us to linger in familiar patterns. And for a time it does feel like peace, a soft, gentle reprieve from the chaos of life. Yet, as you look more closely, you begin to notice the subtle erosion beneath that calm surface. Comfort can shield, yes, but it can also cage. It lulls the mind into satisfaction, the heart into inaction, and convinces the spirit that safety equals stability. In reality, comfort is not the source of enduring peace. Growth is. Growth is the quiet architect of resilience, the subtle alchemy that transforms fear into understanding, hesitation into momentum, and potential into realized purpose. Napoleon Hill once observed, "Great achievement is usually born of great sacrifice and is never the result of selfishness." The sacrifices Hill speaks of are often the surrender of comfort, the willingness to step into discomfort, to risk the familiar for the unknown. Think of the moments when you felt a deep pull towards something uncertain. Perhaps it was a career change, a bold conversation, a move to a new city, or the pursuit of a dream you barely allowed yourself to imagine. The choice to remain safe felt natural, almost protective. Yet, with time, the decision to cling to safety began to feel constraining, like a garment that no longer fits. What once felt like risk now emerges as truth. That trepidation, that fear of discomfort, was not a signal to stop, but a signpost pointing toward growth. In embracing the unknown, we discover not just capability, but identity, the contours of our character that only emerge when we move beyond the familiar. Growth, in this sense, is less about achievement and more about revelation, revealing what you are truly capable of becoming. The essence of life is not to arrive safely, but to keep evolving courageously. Life does not reward caution with richness. It rewards engagement, curiosity, and the willingness to act despite fear. Each choice to move forward in the face of uncertainty reshapes the landscape of possibility. Every small act of bravery rewrites your story, whether it is speaking up when your voice quivers, investing in a project that might fail, or taking steps toward a dream that feels too big. These seemingly minor decisions compound, not unlike interest on savings, into a life lived with purpose, vitality, and integrity. In the words of James Clear, "You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." Here, the system is courage, the consistent practice of choosing growth over convenience. True freedom is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of moving through it. Freedom does not come when all risks are removed, but when you cultivate the inner steadiness to face fear without flinching, to act despite doubt, and to embrace uncertainty without retreat. Fear is a constant companion, and that is not a flaw in your journey. but a reality of being human. The difference lies not in eliminating fear, but in learning to navigate it, to let it inform without immobilizing, and to allow it to refine rather than define you. In that mastery, you begin to recognize that the external world, with all its unpredictability, is not your adversary. The struggle was never against life, but against your own reluctance to rise. When you cease resisting, the quiet war that has lived within you transforms into a dynamic harmony, a balance between caution and courage, between ease and challenge. Consider for a moment the trajectory of your own choices. How often have you lingered in safety, only to realize later that hesitation cost you more than action ever could? The world, in all its complexity, does not demand perfection. It demands engagement. It asks you to show up, to step into uncertainty, to risk discomfort in the pursuit of alignment with your deeper self. The paradox is clear. Safety tempts, but growth fulfills. Fear threatens, but courage liberates. And when you begin to act in alignment with this paradox, life begins to respond differently. Opportunities that once seemed distant or improbable appear with surprising clarity. Relationships deepen. Work becomes more than a transaction. It becomes an extension of purpose. Even failure ceases to feel like a punishment, and instead becomes a refining fire that tempers resilience, insight, and confidence. Every moment in which you choose growth over convenience, every hesitation overcome, every risk embraced, becomes a thread in the tapestry of your becoming. Growth begins where safety ends. It is at the edge of comfort that the richness of life waits to be discovered. This is not a call to reckless abandon, but to intentional courage, a steady willingness to engage with the challenges, uncertainties, and vulnerabilities that define the human experience. It is here that peace is found, not in the absence of risk, but in the alignment of action with authenticity. The life of true depth is never safe, but it is profoundly alive. As you reflect on this journey, you may notice a quiet transformation within yourself. The fear that once held sway no longer dictates your decisions. The restlessness that once felt like dissatisfaction has become the gentle pulse of purpose. You understand that the quiet war between comfort and growth never fully disappears. It simply evolves. By choosing growth consistently, by listening to the subtle nudges toward courage, by embracing the small and large risks that stretch your limits, you allow that war to transform into a state of harmony. The tension that once existed between safety and expansion dissolves into a rhythm where rest and action, reflection and pursuit, fear and courage all coexist without contradiction. Ultimately, the journey reveals an essential truth. You were never fighting the world, never contending with external forces as the primary obstacle. The challenge, the struggle, and the war have always been internal. It is the reluctance to rise, the hesitation to confront fear, the seduction of ease that created the sense of conflict. Once you recognize this, the path forward becomes clear. Growth is not found in avoidance, in meticulous safety, or in perfection. Growth is found in courage, the willingness to face what you have long feared, to step into the unknown, and to do so with steady, intentional resolve. And so we arrive at the core of this understanding. Growth begins where safety ends, and peace begins where growth becomes your natural state. In choosing growth, you find liberation from the illusions of comfort, freedom from the paralysis of fear, and alignment with the truest expression of your potential. Comfort may have once promised serenity, but growth delivers it in a form far deeper, richer, and more enduring than mere ease could ever provide. What once seemed like risk now feels like truth, and in that truth you discover the extraordinary quiet of life lived fully, courageous, awake, and profoundly free. As we draw this reflection to a close, I want to thank you for taking this journey with me, for daring to look beyond the familiar walls of comfort, for listening with openness, and for allowing yourself to consider the subtle truths that growth quietly teaches. Each moment you chose to engage with these ideas, to sit with the discomfort of possibility, you were practicing courage in its simplest, most profound form. Remember, every time you choose courage over ease, you are quietly reshaping the trajectory of your life. These changes may feel invisible at first, small, almost imperceptible shifts, but over time they compound into transformation. Discomfort is not the enemy of peace, it is its companion, its teacher, and often its most honest path. So leave this space not with the urge to chase endlessly, but with the intention to grow, steadily, quietly, and bravely. Walk forward, lighter, clearer, and freer, knowing that each step taken in alignment with courage is a step toward the life you were always meant to live.